All right. The 2002 team, just a couple things, again, that were important to know about that. Number one is nobody expected us to win that year the national championship. We weren't ranked like that. They didn't have that kind of reputation. Some people thought we had limited resources because of who we lost the last two previous years. So my point is that the trademark that they left there is they exceeded expectations, number one. You say, well, how did they do that? Well, we ended up winning the RMAC regular season, but we lost in the tournament, and we had some internal problems that were very quiet during that period of time. And there were a couple key players, as there always are in those situations, and they were unhappy with each other. So the big trial and tribulation, if you will, at that time was how to figure out how to untie knots so we could go forward and give ourselves a chance in the NCAA playoffs. Dairy Queen. The two guys that were over at Salem Takeo, if you go on that road, there's a Dairy Queen as you go there to Salem Takeo, and so I would occasionally, when I would go over there to see a player or whatever, I'd sneak a cone. All right, I like the vanilla cone dipped in chocolate, always the small one. Not really. But I thought, well, let's dig this guy out of the hole. He wouldn't come out of his room. He was very upset. So anyway, got him out of the room. We went over to the Dairy Queen, sat at a table and had a milkshake. And pretty much that 2 or 3 hours determined the national championship. And all we did was talk about his frustrations, talk about his childhood. It was just the right time to do that. So anyway, we march in to our first game, and we still weren't quite right. We had lost in the second round of the RMAC, which we hadn't done much in the tournament. And we win by 6 at South Dakota State. And then the next game, we won by 16. Then we play the big boys. It's their home venue, 8,800 people. And Luke Kendall, who was our 2, sometimes he could play the point when Clayton was taking a rest, he scored 37 points that night. And my wife last night highlighted, she said, Luke, unbelievable. You had 8,800 people there. My middle child, youngest son, Spencer, they had some very aggressive fans, and they found out where the 3 or 4 people were, Joan being one of them, Molly and Spencer, and they were like this on them pretty hard. And it was a nasty crowd. It was a cold night, about 20 below. And that crowd was sitting there waiting 2 hours before the game with the Elmer Fudd hats on and the Pendletons going to get a ticket. I'm telling you, and we brought that bus down that tunnelway, and they let us out. We did our thing. But that night, we ended up winning that game last second. I'll just say that. And the minute that they didn't make their shot and the buzzer went off, I kid you not, 2 minutes later, there was nobody in that gym except for us. I have never seen an exit like that, 8,800 people. And we were there running around, celebrating with nobody watching. Nobody watching. There was 8 of us. I mean, poor Joan, she's there looking around. She looked like Valvano looking for somebody to hug. She couldn't find anybody. I think I sent Spencer over to her. Could have been Clayton. But nonetheless, we go into the Elite 8, and the team that was ranked number 1, San Bernardino, had beaten us in Hawaii much earlier, and they were very, very talented. We ended up winning that game by 32 points. And then that pushed us into the next game. The team that we played in the next game, I think they had 14 points at halftime. In other words, the display, we were a team that was hot, and then we ended up beating Kentucky Wesleyan in a dogfight by 8 points. And Kentucky Wesleyan was the power in the United States. They went for 9 straight years to the national championship game, and they were the big boys on the block. And if you said, what were the highlights or the thumbprint of the 2002 team, number one, it was their ability to get along. Number two is the bench sacrificed. As we made our march to the national championship, the bench got shorter and shorter, and there were some guys who could flat out contribute and play, and they didn't get to play as much as they wanted, or they didn't play at all. But as it played out, they let those guys that played the game for Metro State and the institution play with freedom and supported them, and it was painful for them. It was a taxing national championship because we had a talented bench. But they let that go, and that's exactly what happened. So I think that the biggest untold story of that year, for my money, was the bench. Those guys sacrificed so that those guys could play their minutes and get us a national championship. And so I would just say to you guys, to me, exceeded expectations, but the untold story was being magnanimous. Incredible, credible group. 2002, this group, would you please come up?